Hey Ray, how are you?
Well, yourself?
Doing well, thank you. Thanks for taking the time to meet with us today.
Sure. Give me.
So I know that you know most, if not all of us. Good?
Yes.
Awesome. So I know that you know most, if not all of us, but we'll do brief introductions before we get started. And as you know, we started the Southwest Florida Alliance of Chambers in 2018, and we represent 8 chambers of commerce in Lee and Collier counties and 6,000 businesses and over 300,000 residents and constituents. We are recording this interview and we'll be posting it on our websites and our social media. So thank you again for taking the time to be with us. Just in case you don't know some of us on the call, we'll go ahead and do some brief introductions. If you want to, John, Donna, Colleen, Jackie, then Michael.
Sure. Good afternoon, Ray. It's John Lai, President CEO of the San Luis Captiva Chamber of Commerce. Thanks for joining us today.
Hi, Ray. I'm Donna Germain, President and CEO of the Chamber of Commerce of Cape Coral. Thank you for being with us today.
Hi there, I'm Colleen DePasquale, Greater Fort Myers Chamber of Commerce.
Hey Ray, Jackie Lezak, Fort Myers Beach Chamber of Commerce.
And Michael Dalby, the President and CEO of the Greater Naples Chamber and serving all of Collier County.
Great. So Ray, we appreciate the service that you have provided to our region over all the years. For those who will watch this recording and maybe not have known you in the past, can you just tell us a little bit about yourself?
Sure. For the past 8 years, I've had the honor and the privilege of representing House District 76.
Ray, I apologize. We're having a hard time hearing you.
Turn my volume up. Is that any better?
No.
You get even closer.
That's good. Now we can hear you.
But I'll stay this close then. I've had the honor and privilege of representing House District 76, which is coastal and southern Lee County, in the Florida House of Representatives for the past 8 years. It's been a truly great experience. I got elected right as we were coming out of the Great Recession and had the opportunity to serve as we recovered from that. And it's been an 8 years, I think, of significant innovation and accomplishment. If you go back and look during those 8 years, we cut taxes by about $10 billion. We paid down our debt by $4 billion. We balanced our budget every year. And because we governed in a fiscally conservative manner, the economy in Florida came out of the Great Recession faster than other states. And our private sector job growth was top 2 in the nation. Now we're facing additional challenges with the COVID-19 pandemic, and there will be challenges for the next group of legislators. And it's my sincere hope that I'll have the opportunity to go to the Senate and continue working on behalf of the citizens in Lee County.
And what prompted you to run for office again for the Senate seat?
You know, when I got elected to the House, I genuinely anticipated I would serve my 8 years in the House and then come home. And when that changed was when the dynamics of the seat changed. A couple of things. First, we did redistricting, which put Senator Benaquisto on a 10-year cycle instead of an 8-year cycle. So her seat was ending at the same time as the seat I was ending in. And then the second thing that changed was Matt Caldwell, who I committed to support for the state Senate, made the decision to run for Commissioner of Agriculture. And so at that point, the seat was going to be open. It was going to be open when I was leaving the House, which was very important to me because I knew I was going to be in a position of leadership under Speaker Oliva and had no interest in attempting to leave the House early for any opportunity. I wanted to see my commitment through. So the opportunity was there. And then as I looked ahead, I feel very good about what we've accomplished over the last 8 years, but I know there's more work to be done. And frankly, I really enjoy the work of legislating, the crafting of bills, the getting into the details of policy, and working with constituents to make government serve them better. All of those were things I found I truly enjoyed. And so with the opportunity before me, I decided to throw my hat in the ring.
And what makes you qualified to represent the business community?
Well, I would start with this. Although I'm currently in the public sector, I've worked for Florida Gulf Coast University close to 15 years, if I'm not at my 15-year mark there. the first job I had was with GE Corporate, and I spent a decade working for them. And this was General Electric when they were run by Jack Welch and were considered the best run corporation in the world. That gave me real world experience in the private sector, and I rose up through the ranks at GE and left them as a person that was running their U.S. imports and compliance team, which was $1 billion enterprise when you consider all of the imports that we were bringing in from all of our suppliers over the world. Ultimately, I made the transition and decided to get out of the corporate world and moved into public service and higher education. I think as a person that has a background in both the private sector and public education, that gives me a perspective and a viewpoint that's very valuable when we're going through and making policy decisions. The other thing I'd point to would be my record. For the last 8 years, I have a solid record of supporting initiatives in the business community, voting for legislation that helps the business community, standing up for the business community against the trial bar, who continues to make it difficult for small businesses with the legal climate that has emerged in the state of Florida. And for those efforts, the business community has recognized me. I think the Florida Chamber of Commerce put out their grading of legislators last week. I had a perfect score of 100. And I've had consistently great scores from the Florida Chamber of Commerce and from the other business entities that score at legislators, such as the Associated Industries of Florida. And I'll let the record speak for itself. I feel confident about what we've accomplished in the last 8 years and the role that I've played in helping us get there.
Thank you. In your opinion, what is the most pressing issue facing the Southwest Florida business community? And if elected, what would you do to address this issue?
Well, I think the number one issue is going to be it's really, I think, a two-part issue. The economic recovery as we come out of the pandemic from the COVID-19 virus. We've seen a number of businesses that shut down that have not reopened, even though we're now in phase 2 of economic recovery. Not all of the businesses that closed are going to make it. And it's not going to be as easy as just flipping a switch and everything going back to where it was before the pandemic. And so I think the next group of legislators are going to be encountering, as a result of that economic fallout, a budget that is going to be less than what we anticipated. So you're going to need someone who holds that seat and will work towards solutions that will help the business community. And that's what I intend to do. I'll start with, I think what we did as we came out of the Great Recession was the right path. What we did was we lived within our means, and when faced with challenges, we had decisions. One decision could be when you have a declining economy and less revenue than anticipated to raise taxes, or the other decision is to cut spending. Coming out of the Great Recession, spending was cut. I think that was the right decision. I don't think you can tax your way out of bad economic times. And so my commitment will be to be the conservative voice and the conservative vote for Southwest Florida to put us in an environment where we can come out of it as quickly as possible. Some of the things the governor has done during the state of emergency, we need to continue. We passed some deregulation, and in some areas, he embraced deregulation as a way to adapt and cope with the pandemic. Those are things we need to take a strong look at once the state of emergency is over, because we saw that the public responded to that and embraced that. And so areas like regulation over businesses, we need to be taking a closer look at and eliminating regulations that slow you down and put you further away from your customer and serving their needs. I'm committed to that. The second aspect of what our challenge is going to be is also related to the health implications of COVID-19. What steps are we going to take as a government dealing with the pandemic in the future? Everyone's talking about there's going to be a new normal, and the question is, what's that new normal going to be? I don't think that the new normal should be government mandating to businesses how you should run your shop. I think in this case, that decision should be left on the local level. I'm going to tell you, I think Collier County got it right with the decision that they made to leave that up to the individual businesses on whether they're going to mandate whether there will be masks worn in their stores or not, or if their employees, the regulations that will be put on their employees. So from my viewpoint, that's not something states should be preempting local government on. That should rest in local government. And if it's functioning as efficiently as possible, local government should be leaving that in the hands of business. The health aspect I think will be critical is I do believe, and call me an optimist, but I do believe we're going to have a vaccine for this, and I think we're going to have it by the end of the year. So I think the next legislature, which convenes in March, will be facing the decision of, does the state have an interest in obtaining that vaccine and making it available to anyone in the state who wants it? And I think the answer to that is yes. And so that's the other thing I will be doing, which I think will benefit the business community, because when folks have confidence that they can go out and not catch this virus, which is very contagious, I think we'll see more people in small businesses doing more business.
Thank you. As you know, Southwest Florida's economy is heavily dependent on hospitality and tourism. So if elected, what would you do to encourage economic diversification in the region?
Well, I think we've done a great bit of encouragement of economic diversification, primarily by our efforts to open up industries and invite anyone who is anywhere else in the United States to come here and do business. I think the key thing is, if we have a low tax environment, which we do in Florida, and we have an environment that shows that we're not growing regulations, but we're moving in the other direction and removing regulations, then we've got a really good case to make to individuals that this is where they want to have their business. And we've seen businesses grow. Like I said, coming out of the Great Recession, Florida was in the top 2 in private sector job creation of the 50 states. And that was because of our economic environment that we created. So I think we should continue down that path, continue to embrace disruptive technologies that emerge, but that are good for business, like Uber, and do what we can to make this a place where people want to be to do their business.
So just a few more questions left. You know that water quality is our #1 priority, and this group was formed out of the water crisis in 2018. So if elected, what specific projects would you advocate for to improve and protect Southwest Florida's water quality?
Well, I'm glad you've asked the question. Let's start with, where are we on water quality? Because you have to take inventory to where you're at to know what you need to do next. And what I would say is, if you look over the 8 years, I'm probably most proud of the work we've done on water quality. In my freshman term, we voted for a budget that put funding in that raised a mile of Tamiami Trail so that water could flow south through the Everglades into Florida Bay for the first time in a century since Tamiami Trail was put in back in 1919. We didn't stop there. We put money in the budget in the last 2 sessions to raise that another 4.5 miles. And Governor DeSantis, leveraging his relationship with the federal government, got a federal match to what we put in. So now there's going to be 10 miles of Tamiami Trail raised so that water can flow naturally south into Florida Bay, which hasn't happened, as I said, since 1919. That's progress. Water's moving south, which is what I think all of us want. Beyond that, if you go back to the root of the problem with the discharges, it goes back to Hurricane Katrina and the fact that after the levees broke in New Orleans, the Army Corps of Engineers was directed by the president to identify their most significant area of weakness where there could be catastrophic loss of life. And they came back and said it's the Herbert Hoover Dike around Lake Okeechobee. And so the Lake Okeechobee release discharge schedule, LORD, was then adjusted. And instead of keeping, say, 15 feet of water in the lake, they moved it down to 11 or 12. Those numbers are approximate. I'd have to go and get you the real numbers, but it illustrates the problem that we came in. Once you started retaining 4 feet less of water in a lake the size of Lake Okeechobee, that is what necessitated the discharges. What we did as a state was, even though that's a federal project, and it was taking forever for the federal government to get that done, we put money in the state budget, we gave it to the federal government, and we said, go spend this on Lake Okeechobee, specifically on the Herbert Hoover Dike. We're giving you the money to seed that. And then Governor DeSantis leveraged his relationship with the federal government, and he got them to prioritize that. That is scheduled to be done, I believe, in 2022. And when that is done, they can go back and revise the Lake Okeechobee release discharge schedule and potentially keep more water in. Why is that important? In 2018, when we had the terrible algae crisis, had we been on the original Lake Okeechobee release discharge schedule prior to Hurricane Katrina, there would have been no release down the Caloosahatchee that summer, not one. So getting that repaired allows them to retain water, which helps our water quality. Then if you go to the project that began before I even got in the legislature, the C-43 reservoir, we continued funding that, and that is now fully funded, and the construction of that reservoir has begun. That will be completed, I'm told, in 2023. So if water is released to the Caloosahatchee, it can be stored in the C-43 reservoir before we have to take it. And then Governor DeSantis, showing real leadership, stepped up and said, not only are we going to store that water, I want funding to put in a filtration system so that we can make sure it's clean water when it comes out of the C-43 reservoir. We funded that and got that done session before last. So
Oh, Ray, it looks like you froze.
can you hear
Okay,
me?
now we can.
Okay. So if you look at holistically, we put projects in place that will allow water to flow south. We put projects in place that will allow water to be retained. We put projects in place that will store it in the C-43 reservoir. And we passed the southern reservoir, which will give us more storage south of the lake. The next thing we did, and we did this in the last two sessions, was we put money in for storage north of the lake in ASW wells, which has always been in the CERP plan, Central Everglades Restoration Plan, but was farther down the list. So as I look at it, we're storing more water north. We're going to have the ability to hold more water in the lake. We've got storage if it goes east. We've got storage if it goes south, and we've got a pathway into Florida Bay. All of these things will come together and be completed in 2023. By 2023, each of those projects will be completed. I think we're getting where we need to be to solve the issue of water quality. What I'm committed to do, if I'm elected to the state senate, is to continue to support our governor, who has made two requests, which are the highest requests for water quality funding that we've ever done in the legislature. I'm proud to have voted for both of those and to have championed projects that were even beyond what he asked for. He asked for $625 million. We funded $687 million. I will continue to do that and continue to work on that. The good news is, thanks to the Legacy Florida bill, we have a dedicated funding source for the next 15 years that will continue paying for water quality projects long after all the projects that I've described to you are completed and in place. So I think the light is at the end of the tunnel, and it truly is a light. It's not a train. We just have to stay the course and have people there that are willing to support the governor in that effort.
Thank you. In addition to the projects, what specific actions do you think lawmakers should take to improve and protect Southwest Florida's waterways?
Protect our water. Well, what I would support is we've taken care of, I think, identifying the pollution that could potentially come from Lake Okeechobee. Another threat to our waterway is septic tank leakage, particularly along the Caloosahatchee River. I know the legislature before I was elected in 2012 had put in a bill to mandate sewer tank inspections and replacements. That was eventually repealed before we got there because of the cost. That was the right path. I think the problem was it was too big a step to take at one time. So I think we should incrementalize that and start with properties that are along the river. If you have a property that is along the river and that is on septic, those properties should be inspected, and if those septic tanks aren't working, they should be replaced. And the reason for that, and you can do, I think, start that way legitimately, is because there's a public impact on whether or not those septic tanks function or don't function. And so that's a step that needs to be taken. I support that. I filed a bill that would have allowed the PACE program, which is a private funding source used for properties to improve them for clean energy, to also be used for septic tanks along the river. Unfortunately, we couldn't get movement on that bill, but I do think that's the right path. We've got to start with the river and provide the ability for the people that live on the river to access capital to make those replacements. If we do that, I think that improves our waterways.
Great, thank you. Just one last question. Is there anything else you'd like us to know about you or your priorities?
I'd say the last things I would add on my priorities are things that I've worked on that we have not gotten accomplished, but I do believe are important. I am a big proponent of keeping government accountable to the citizens. The first bill I filed, and the only bill I committed to filing when I was a House candidate back in 2012 was to not allow them without hearing from the public. In 2012, thanks to a Florida Supreme Court ruling at that time, they'd held that public comment wasn't covered under our government and sunshine laws. So I carried the bill that said, yes, it is. We've expanded the sunshine laws. You have to listen to the public before you spend their money. That's how you keep government accountable. Now what we have going on is we have situations where local governments are suing individuals who file a public records request. So you file a public records request, which is how you keep government transparent and accountable. And instead of giving them the answer, they serve them with a civil lawsuit and drag them in the court. That's not wrong. That's a perversion of our government and sunshine statutes. And I've got a bill that will fix that. I'm committed to getting that done. We have passed that bill in the House the last 2 years. Unfortunately, it's run into trouble in the Senate. And if I'm in the Senate working senators, I can guarantee you I'm going to get that bill done. And we're going to keep government accountable to you and to all of the taxpayers who government should be serving rather than the other way.
Great. Well, thank you so much for taking the time to speak with us today. Like I said, we'll be posting these on our website and our social media accounts. And we wish you luck in the election.
Thank you. Good seeing all of you.
Thank you.
Have a great day.
Yep. Bye.